Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. Alongside me, as always, is Dr. Craig Stern. And we have three interesting topics for you today. It's all been in the news, it's been on the headlines, and we'll just get right into it. In case you were living under a rock this past week, the federal government has been shut down, right? The federal government shut down for about a couple days until they reached an agreement which is temporary until the next month when it shuts down again. But with all this discord and uncertainty in the federal government, how does this have what effect does this have on healthcare?
Well, clearly, I mean, we've talked about this before.
Right.
Healthcare is in an area of uncertainty where everybody is sitting back, not making huge decisions, trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Right.
However, usually when this happens, the states begin to take over. So many states have started to come up with their own views about what they want to do with healthcare.
Right.
Some have taken away some of the guaranteed issue or the mandate that all people have insurance. Some people have dealt with the issue that they want to have certain health benefits but not include all the essential benefits.
Right.
But it means all the states have their different ideas about what to do. The con to that, the problem with that, is we end up with 50 different ideas about how healthcare should be done.
Right.
So if you're in one state and you move to another, you get a different view about what happens. Clearly, there has to be an organizing force, but right now, the federal government can't come up with an organizing force. So as a result of that, everybody's trying to figure out what to do.
But with all these states trying to come up with their own ideas, and how do they get funding for it? Because that comes from the federal government.
Well, half comes from the federal government.
Right.
These are usually done in block grants. Half comes from the federal government, half comes from the states. As we found out, many of the states couldn't afford it. So the federal government decreased their contribution to meet the half that the state did, which becomes a problem then, because once again, you have 50 different ideas about what healthcare is supposed to be.
Right. And then with the decreased funding and then rising healthcare costs, that usually doesn't equal out.
No, it doesn't. Right. It doesn't. It's a problem.
It's a huge problem. Well, because of uncertainty, we're not really going to get any more answers out of that one. But we want to move on to a little bit more on the tougher note. It might get hard for you to get through this. We'll try. This medical and behavioral health impact on child and adult abuse. I mean, we were looking at what was happening in Paris, California, with the two parents raising 13 children in one house in hopes to get a TV show. And I read also that there's been about 11 school shootings in the past 30 days. And this is you try to think about the childhood trauma that's going to go on with these children and what they're going to have to go through for the rest of their life. What have the studies shown as far as the impact that these kind of events, now that they're happening sadly more often, what have the studies shown the impact on these kids throughout their lives after experiencing this kind of traumatic event?
This is horrible, and obviously the sad thing is that it's becoming the new norm versus something that's unique, which is really scary and really horrific.
Right.
There's two kind of problems that the people have, and that's not to minimize it or to delegitimize it in any way.
Right.
One is physical. Whatever trauma that they have felt in the process will need to be treated. Hopefully it's something that is treatable, but depending on how they were shot, depending on what the injuries were, etc., they will have significant trauma and things that they have to deal with from a medical standpoint.
Right.
And it may be, depending on what goes on, that they may have some chronic conditions that carry forward that have to be addressed.
Right.
On the other side is behavioral health. Many people have looked at this and say, well, it's a PTSD issue. But it's bigger than that. It's an issue that not only do you have potentially fear of trauma and therefore PTSD and all of the complications of that,
right,
but you also have avoidance kind of problems where you're afraid of getting involved because of the consequences that could happen. So you're dealing with people who have effectively lifetimes of trauma that they have to address,
Right.
either medical and or behavioral health, and how they're going to deal with that. And it's a scary thing, and it's unfair that these people have to address that, but they and their relatives and their friends and potentially future relatives and friends are going to have to cope with this. There are new kinds of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right. I've heard of that.
That are looking at that, trying to deal with the problem as it is today, rather than the problem back to when you were a child or when the trauma occurred. But either way, each of these has to be addressed. And then the question from the other side, from the medical side, will be, do we have enough experts in order to help treat them?
Right. And then it's more than just a behavioral issue now, because along with the PTSD, or the several different branches of PTSD that these children are going to have to cope with, comes the chronic disease from not eating enough because they're feeling this way or feeling that way, or eating too much. So then that leads to other things like diabetes and so on and so forth. How can, other than just families coming together to try to help this person cope, how can someone avoid these kind of issues and maybe get them back into real life?
Well, I don't know that you can avoid them.
Right.
You're dealing in some cases with anxiety, maybe all the way to major anxiety disorder. The real problem is support, that there is appropriate knowledge and help by family and friends that understand and try and support what the problems are, people coming together. It's a sad way to bring people together, but clearly that has to happen in the treatment process. And other people need to be aware of these so that everyone can begin to come together. So it's not just one family, one group that's trying to deal with it, but other people understand that people may have consequences. It's like Profarma had an employee some time ago who was part of the 9/11 disaster and was in one of the towers and got out of the tower before the tower crumbled. Well, we all were sensitive to it and tried to deal with it. And all you can do is try and be supportive in that regard, because there are things that are going to come up, and that kind of thing will never, ever leave someone's consciousness.
Right. And we don't want them to forget it per se, but you want to help them cope, and you want to help them be able to still maintain a healthy life and not have to avoid people or avoid responsibilities or avoid other things. Let's leave that topic, because that one's definitely a tough topic. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask them below in the comment section. But moving on, we want to talk about, on a more lighter note, we want to talk about hospitals becoming manufacturers themselves. And the idea of this was hospitals were dealing with a bunch of problems, meaning a shortage of drugs, or drugs becoming too expensive that they needed to come up with more affordable options when there weren't many. So what impact does this have on drug prices overall for many drug manufacturers?
Well, the hospitals do have a major problem, and what's of interest is their shortages are not in new cancer chemotherapy. They're not in new kind of drugs they use. They're in standard kind of therapies that are used in surgery, used in the intensive care units, used on the floors, and things that used to be just as simple as water, and many of us made it in pharmacy school even to deal with, bicarbonate solutions or things like that. So what they've done is to focus, or clearly to focus on injectables and the shortages there. Their pharmacies have already sterile manufacturing with appropriate IV hoods, with appropriate kind of sterile procedures, etc., to do that. And now what they're trying to do is to set it up so that typically if you make an IV or a compound, it's for a particular person. So it's done on a prescription for an IV for a particular person. In this regard, they would make up a whole batch of them. They'd have them on the shelf. Then when one person comes down, they pull it down from the shelf and label. Another person comes in and deals with that. That's really where they're going to it.
Right.
And then clearly costs are less because whatever the marketplace is charging, they can make it for less. That doesn't stop them from
Right.
charging more in a given hospital for a given product, but it does stop them and provides a new market capitalization, a new market concept for what the cost of that product is.
So this allows hospitals to set their own price.
They can.
That's fine.
They can.
Could this maybe lead to hospitals charging more for an item that a drug manufacturer might offer for less?
Yes. However, I think the issue here, at least I hope the issue here,
Right.
is not just trying to compete on tablets or capsules, which they probably won't make. It won't be on issues where they have new branded products and they're expensive and they're trying to redo that. That won't be where it comes from. It'll be on standard kind of injectable infusion type of therapies that either are not available or for which the cost is astronomical, and they'll be trying to cut their costs, provide for the shortage where they have enough of the product available to deal with it.
So the idea here wouldn't be what the common person hopes, which would be combating some of these drug prices that are ridiculous. The idea here is we're running short on these type of drug. We're going to make our own and then sell it at our own price.
That's right. That's right. But for things that they need that are in short supply,
Right.
for surgeries, intensive care units, things like that. So bicarbonate solution and things that they would normally just buy and they would have cases of to deal with, now they can't get it. So this would provide a new source.
A new source of income, a new source of revenue too.
It would. It
Yeah.
would. It would.
So making the drug and then passing the price off to either the patient or their insurer.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Well, interesting news. I'd like to see how it comes out. We'll probably revisit this topic sometime in the future once we have more information. But for now, we would like you to go visit ProPharmaConsultants.com. We have a new, well, not new. We have a free information page called RxInfoX. Dr. Stern also writes articles. You can find that in the Pharmacy Benefit News section of our website. And within that, Pharmacy Benefit News is Analytics at Work. And would you like to explain to them about that?
The staff came to me and said, why don't we have a section where we can't talk about given client engagements because we want to show respect and ethics for those particular clients and their problems.
Right.
But we can talk in a general way about how to solve particular analytical problems, how it's being done, what the methods are, and then what the outcomes are. So that's what we're doing.
Right. And you could also see what some of us do here in the office, you know, some of us hard workers here at ProPharma. And also, if you'd like to see Dr. Stern speak, he's going to be speaking at a PBMI conference in Palm Springs. That'll be on March 7th. And that's it for today. If you'd like to leave a comment or a message or talk about how great we're doing, you can feel free to leave that comment down below. And we will see you again next week.